143 missed calls from a man who never once called me when he didn't need money. That's the number I counted from an ICU bed at Roper St. Francis Hospital, Charleston, South Carolina, on a Monday morning in November, while 2 drainage tubes in my chest did the work my heart had refused to do on the steps of St. Michael's Church approximately 14 hours earlier. My phone screen kept lighting up on the bedside tray, like a calculator someone forgot to turn off. I didn't answer a single one. I let it ring. The heart attack happened Sunday, 11:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I'm an accountant, and accountants notice time the way other people notice weather. Automatically, precisely, and with a quiet awareness of when something doesn't add up. I just walked out of the 11 o'clock service, shook hands with Reverend Tillman on the portico the way I've done every Sunday for 22 years, and made it exactly 4 steps down the limestone stairs before my chest decided to renegotiate its contract with the rest of my body. I don't remember falling. I remember the limestone step against my cheek. I remember the sky above the steeple going white. I remember a woman's voice, someone I didn't know, saying, "Don't move, sir, don't move." And then I remember waking up in a room that smelled like adhesive and steady beeping, with a stent in my left anterior descending artery and a surgeon who looked barely old enough to vote telling me I was lucky. I asked him what lucky meant in this context. He said it meant my heart had stopped long enough to get everyone's attention, but not long enough to make it permanent. Welcome to the club. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to do the right thing. They just chose the invoice instead. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to see how this one balances out. My name is Frank DeLuca. I am 69 years old. I built DeLuca and Associates from a second-hand desk in my spare bedroom and a yellow legal pad into a financial consulting firm with 40 employees, a client portfolio managing $200 million in assets, and a reputation in this city that took 35 years to earn and has never once been questioned. In 35 years, I have never miscalculated a single figure, not one. My clients call me the ledger, and they mean it as a compliment, which tells you everything you need to know about the kind of man I am and the kind of people who trust me. I have one son. His name is Dylan. He is 37 years old. He lives in Venice Beach, California, where he produces a podcast about entrepreneurial mindset that has 14,000 subscribers and has never once turned a profit. I know this because I've been financing it. 4 years. $280,000 in studio costs, equipment, and production staff, plus $3,200 a month for his apartment, a 1-bedroom with an ocean view that I've never seen, and he's never once invited me to visit. I called Dylan first from the ICU. That's the thing nobody tells you about being a father. You always call the difficult one first, even when there's only one, because some part of you is still running the numbers, still hoping this time the balance will come out different. He picked up on the second ring. That should have told me everything. Dad. His voice had that particular warmth it gets when he wants something or senses he's about to lose something. After 37 years, I know the difference. Barely. I'm in the hospital, I said. Roper St. Francis. ICU. Heart attack yesterday morning on the church steps. Silence. Not the concerned kind. The kind where you can hear someone calculating. How bad? Stent. Drainage tubes. They're saying I was lucky. Okay. Another pause. I could hear Cassandra in the background, her voice low and quick, the way she talks when she's coaching him through a response. Those two have been together 2 years, and she still treats every conversation like a pitch meeting. Okay, Dad, here's the thing. He exhaled. We're right in the middle of recording season. I've got Headspace and 2 other sponsors on a deadline, and Cass already booked the studio through the end of the month. If I fly out now, we lose the Headspace window entirely, and that's a $40,000 contract. He said $40,000 to a man lying in an ICU with a stent holding his heart together. My son quoted a sponsorship number at me from a podcast that has never made a single dollar without my checkbook behind it. And it's not like you're in danger, right? The doctor said you're stable? Son. I said it quiet. the way I used to say it when he was 14 and lying to my face about where he'd been on a Friday night. Go record your podcast. He exhaled, relief wrapped in the thinnest tissue of guilt. You sure? No. We'll FaceTime every day, I promise. Cass says, get better soon. And Dad, seriously, take it easy, okay? You push yourself too hard. He hung up before I could respond to that particular masterpiece of arithmetic. Me, Frank DeLuca, lying in an ICU bed with a stent in my artery and 2 tubes in my chest, being told by the man who had received $280,000 from me in 4 years, plus $3,200 a month for an apartment he'd never invited me to see, that I pushed myself too hard. I put the phone face down on the chest monitor and stared at the ceiling. 69 years old and still being surprised by this man. That's on me. That one goes in my column. The ICU nurse on my floor was a solid woman from Beaufort named Jackie, who called everyone Han and meant it every single time, which is harder than it sounds when you're 12 hours into a shift and your patient's son just chose a podcast over a cardiac event. She came in around 8 to check my drainage, saw the expression on my face, and said, "You want to talk about it, or you want me to act like I didn't hear every word through that curtain?" "Neither," I said. "All right, hon." She adjusted the line, tapped something into her tablet, and was almost to the door when I said, "My son's recording a podcast." She stopped, turned around slow. "While you're in here?" "He says he's got a $40,000 sponsorship window." Jackie looked at me with the particular expression of a woman who has heard everything and is still occasionally genuinely surprised. She said, which in context was an audit finding. After she left, I lay still for a long time. The monitor beeped. The drainage tubes pulled. November light came through the ICU window, gray and thin, the way Charleston gets when the season turns, and the warmth drains out of everything at once. On the bedside table, next to my phone, there was a manila folder, neatly labeled. My name, my insurance policy number, my emergency contacts, my medication list, my allergies, all of it organized with the precision of someone who understood that details save lives. Someone had brought it in at 2 in the morning, before I was even out of surgery. It wasn't Dylan. I didn't know it yet. But the woman who'd brought that folder was about to bring me something else from my office. Something that would make the insurance papers feel like the only clean document left in my entire life. I put the phone face down on the chest monitor. Then I made 2 phone calls. Between them, I erased 9 years of automatic generosity and started the most expensive week of my son's life. The first call took 90 seconds. The second took 4 minutes. Between them, I dismantled a financial arrangement that had been running on autopilot since the year my son decided that my money was a subscription service and not a gift. I called Philip Wen, my chief accountant at DeLuca and Associates, at 8:22 on Monday morning. Philip had been with me for 16 years and had the particular talent of executing instructions without attaching opinions to them, which in an accountant is not a personality flaw, but a professional virtue. "Philip, I need 3 actions effective immediately. Go ahead. 1. Suspend the monthly wire to Dylan's apartment account. $3,200. 2. Freeze the studio operating budget. All of it. Every line item. 3. Deactivate the supplementary credit card ending in 4719. Silence. 2 seconds. Philip processing, not judging. Effective when? Effective the moment I stop talking. Done. Anything else? Not today. 90 seconds. 9 years of automatic generosity. Gone between one heartbeat and the next. The monitor didn't even change rhythm. The second call was to a private nursing agency on Calhoun Street. I arranged for a live-in recovery nurse starting Tuesday morning. Her name was Ruth Kinney, 63 years old, originally from Galveston, 22 years of cardiac recovery experience. The intake coordinator described her as thorough, direct, and not interested in small talk, which sounded like exactly the kind of person I needed and exactly the kind of person my son would never think to arrange. 4 minutes, 2 calls, and somewhere in Venice Beach, A 37-year-old man with a $40,000 sponsorship window was about to learn that the account his entire life ran on had just been closed. But not yet. Not today. Today I had other numbers to attend to. I was moved from ICU to a regular room around 11. Room 316, third floor, a window facing east toward the harbor. November in Charleston has a quality of light that accountants understand intuitively. It clarifies. Every line sharpens, every shadow has an edge, and there is nowhere for anything imprecise to hide. I was watching that light cross the floor when the door opened at 1:15 in the afternoon and Nina Vargas walked in. She was carrying a laptop bag over one shoulder and a paper cup of coffee in her left hand. Black, no sugar, a splash of half and half. She set the coffee on my tray table without asking because she already knew. She'd known since she was 24 years old, 2 years into the job, when she started bringing me coffee during late audit nights and never once got it wrong. I brought the Jameson file, the Rutherford Quarterly, and the Peninsula Group contract, she said, unzipping the laptop bag and setting up on the chair beside my bed like this was a Tuesday conference call and not a cardiac recovery room. Jameson needs your sign-off by Wednesday. Rutherford is routine. Peninsula wants to renegotiate the fee structure, and I have 3 options drafted for you to review. She opened the laptop, angled the screen toward me, and waited. No, how are you feeling? No, oh my God, I was so worried. No performance of concern designed to make herself feel useful while doing nothing actually useful. Just the work. Just the thing that needed doing. Just Nina. Peninsula option 2, I said, scanning the screen. But adjust the tiered percentage above 5 million. They'll push back on 7. Offer 6.5 with a floor. She typed, fast, precise, the way I taught her, the way she'd taught herself, really, long before I ever found her. Jamison? Sign off approved. Tell him we'll review the trust allocation in January. Rutherford? Routine is routine. File it. She nodded, closed the laptop, made a note in the margins of a printout with a mechanical pencil she'd been using since I gave her one on her first official day as an employee, 12 years ago. She still used the same brand. 0.5 millimeter. Graphite B. Accountants notice these things. We notice who stays precise when nobody's checking. The office is fine, she said, not looking up. Marcus took the Monday client calls. I briefed the senior team this morning. Everyone knows you're recovering. Nobody's panicking. Good. She put the pencil behind her ear, looked at me directly for the first time since she'd walked in, and said something that made me turn toward the window. Your wife's rosary is in your bedside drawer. I brought it from your office. It was in the top left drawer of your desk, behind the letter tray. Top left drawer. Behind the letter tray. She knew where Gloria kept it, because Gloria had shown her, years ago during one of those Sunday dinners when my wife treated this girl from Cali, Colombia, like the daughter we never had, and Nina treated my wife like the answer to a prayer her mother had been saying since they crossed the border, with 2 suitcases and a work visa that expired in 90 days. I opened the drawer. The rosary was there. Dark wooden beads, a small silver cross, worn smooth by 26 years of Gloria's hands. I held it in my good hand, the one not connected to anything, and ran my thumb across the beads the way I used to run numbers through a spreadsheet, one at a time. Slowly, looking for the error I already knew was there. Thank you, Nina. Yes, sir. She stood, zipped the laptop bag, and paused at the door. Not dramatically. Nina didn't do drama. She paused the way a person pauses when they're deciding whether to say something that isn't in the spreadsheet. Mr. DeLuca. Yes. I ran the full accounts receivable audit last week. Standard quarterly. Everything balanced except one item. I flagged it, but I wanted to talk to you in person before I filed anything. What item? I'd rather show you tomorrow. When you've rested. It's not urgent today. Nina. Tomorrow, Mr. DeLuca. Please. She left. The door closed with the particular quietness of someone who understood that silence, properly timed, communicates more than volume ever could. I sat with Gloria's rosary in my hand, and the coffee going cold on the tray, and the November light pressing flat against the harbor outside my window. 4 years, $280,000 to Dylan's studio, $3,200 a month for his apartment. Not once a question about my health, my weekends, my mornings at St. Michael's. Not once. 12 years with Nina. Not once had she asked me for a raise. Not once had she missed a Monday. Not once had she gotten the coffee wrong. I'm an accountant. I don't believe in feelings. I believe in patterns. And the pattern was so obvious, so brutally clear on that Monday afternoon in room 316, that I was ashamed it had taken a cardiac event to make me read the ledger that had been open on my desk for a decade. I held the rosary. I closed my eyes. And I let myself think the one thought I'd been avoiding since Dylan hung up that morning. I didn't know it yet, but Nina was about to show me something from that audit. Something that had my name on it, but not my signature. Something that would make the rosary feel like the only honest thing left in my son's entire column. 12 years ago, I found a girl sitting cross-legged on the floor of a break room at 11 at night, a community college accounting textbook balanced on an upturned mop bucket, mouthing numbers to herself the way some people mouth prayers. Quietly, desperately, like the numbers were the only thing standing between her and a version of her life she refused to accept. I'd stayed late at the office. That was nothing unusual. In those days, I worked 3-4 nights a week, running year-end audits and reconciling accounts that didn't need reconciling because the work was already perfect, but I checked anyway because that's who I am. Gloria used to say I'd audit my own funeral if they let me. I came down to the first floor to refill my coffee and stopped in the doorway. There she was, 22 years old, cleaning uniform 2 sizes too big, sleeves rolled to the elbows, sneakers so worn the left sole had separated from the canvas at the toe. Her mop was propped in the corner, still wet. The floor was spotless. She'd finished her shift and stayed, not because she had to, but because she had nowhere else to study. When she looked up, she didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't scramble to close the book, or perform the particular kind of embarrassment that people in her position are taught to perform around people in mine. She looked at me directly and said, "I'm on my break, sir." She wasn't. Her shift had ended 40 minutes ago. I knew because I signed the cleaning contract, and I knew every schedule in the building. "What are you studying?" "Accounting. Intro to financial statements. At 11 at night on a mop bucket. The library closes at 9. My apartment doesn't have a desk." She paused. "The bucket is the right height." I looked at the textbook. Page 214. Journal entries. Debits and credits. The foundation of everything I'd built my life on, laid open on a plastic bucket in a room that smelled like pine cleaner and burnt coffee. "You've got the entry on line 4 wrong," I said. "Debits go on the left." She corrected it. Didn't argue, didn't deflect, just fixed it and moved on to line 5. I watched her write. Neat, precise, the kind of handwriting that comes from someone who learned English as a second language and treats every letter like it matters. Because when you grow up translating for your mother at the grocery store, and the clinic and the landlord's office, every letter does matter. I should have walked away. I should have refilled my coffee, gone back upstairs, and driven home to Gloria, who was already asleep with a book on her chest and the bedroom light on because she never turned it off until I was home. Instead, I pulled out the other chair, sat down across from her and said, "Show me what you've got so far." That was the beginning. I started teaching her. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9 to 10:30, after her shift. Debits and credits became cost accounting. Cost accounting became tax preparation. Tax preparation became auditing. She learned faster than anyone I'd ever taught, and I include myself in that comparison, which I do not say lightly. Her mother, Esperanza, called me one evening. Her English was careful, practiced, the kind you build word by word over years of night shifts and determination. She said, "Mr. DeLuca, I want to thank you for helping my Nina." I told her it was nothing. She said, "It is not nothing. My daughter cleans floors, so she can learn numbers." I clean rooms, so she can clean numbers. It is not nothing. I remembered that sentence for 12 years. I will remember it for whatever years I have left. Gloria found out within the first month. She figured it out the way she figured out everything, by paying attention to the things I didn't say. She wasn't jealous. What she had was instinct. The kind that sees a 22-year-old girl studying on a mop bucket at 11 at night and understands immediately that this is not a charity case. This is a person building a floor underneath herself, one number at a time. Invite her to Sunday dinner, Gloria said one evening while rolling pasta dough on the marble counter she'd inherited from her mother. That girl didn't come here to clean floors, Frank. She came here to build one. Nina came that Sunday. She brought arepas her mother had made. Gloria served pasta. They sat at our dining table, the oak one we'd had since 1989, and something happened that I didn't have a formula for. The room got warmer. The food tasted better. The silence between sentences wasn't empty. It was full. The way a ledger is full, when every entry is in the right column. Dylan wasn't there. Dylan was in Los Angeles. Dylan was always in Los Angeles. Nina passed her CPA exam 4 years later. She came into my office at 7:15, before anyone else arrived, stood in front of my desk, and said, "I passed, Mr. DeLuca." Her voice cracked on the word passed in a way that told me she'd been holding herself together all morning and this was the first seam she'd let show. I stood up and shook her hand. Not a hug. A handshake. The kind you give a partner. She understood. Her eyes were wet, but her grip was firm. And that's a combination I will put up against any resume in the state of South Carolina. Gloria cried. Standing in the doorway of my office with a dish towel still in her hand because she'd been in the kitchen when Nina called her first, before she called me, because of course she called Gloria first. Gloria held Nina's face in both hands and said, "I knew it. I knew it the first Sunday." Gloria died on a Wednesday, 2 years after Nina got her CPA. An aneurysm. The kind that doesn't warn you, because that's the only kind there is. One morning she was rolling pasta dough on the marble counter. By afternoon she was gone. 61 years old. 26 years of marriage. Every single one of them balanced. Nina wore black for a month. She sat in the third row at St. Michael's and didn't cry during the service, but afterward in the parking lot, she stood next to her mother and sobbed in a way that made Esperanza hold her tighter than I'd ever seen one person hold another. Dylan didn't come home for the funeral. He sent flowers. White lilies, expensive. The kind that look beautiful and mean nothing. The card said, "Thinking of you, Dad. Wish I could be there." $240. I know because the receipt was in the monthly statement I reviewed that quarter. I kept the card. I kept the receipt. I kept everything. That's what accountants do. We keep receipts. Every single one, and sooner or later, every single one gets reconciled. Ruth Kinney arrived at 7:15 on Tuesday morning, and by 7:45 she had done more for me than my son had done in 4 years. That wasn't even the important thing that happened on Tuesday. She was 63, silver hair cut short and practical, originally from Galveston, and she moved through room 316 the way a senior auditor moves through a messy balance sheet. No wasted motion. No performance. No asking permission for things that obviously needed doing. She checked my chart, reorganized the medication tray that the night nurse had left in what I can only describe as a state of creative disorder, briefed the morning shift on my drainage schedule, and reported a broken call button on the bed rail that apparently nobody had noticed for 2 weeks. It was fixed by noon. She called me Mr. D from the first minute, and she said it the way certain Southern women say things, with a warmth that has structure underneath it, like a load-bearing wall painted to look like a garden fence. "You sleep last night, Mr. D?" "Some." "You eat?" "Nina brought something yesterday." "Nina family?" I paused. It was a simple question. It should have had a simple answer. But I was 69 years old, and lying in a hospital bed with a stent holding my artery together, and simple answers had stopped being available to me somewhere around Sunday morning on the steps of St. Michael's. "Yes," I said. She nodded like that was settled, the way good people settle things, without ceremony, without requiring an explanation, without making you repeat a truth that cost you something to say out loud for the first time. By 9 o'clock, Ruth had the room running like a receivables department. Medications scheduled, meals ordered. The physical therapist briefed. A rattling air vent above my bed reported, escalated, and silenced. 4 years, $280,000 to Dylan's podcast studio. 30 minutes with Ruth Kinney, and the ventilation was fixed. The call button worked, and someone had finally asked me whether I'd slept. The numbers don't lie. They never have. That's the whole point of numbers. Nina came at 2 in the afternoon. I knew something was different the moment she walked in because Nina Vargas does not close doors. She works with doors open. Always has. The way people do when they've spent years proving they have nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. But on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, she closed the door behind her, sat down in the chair beside my bed, and placed her laptop on the tray table without opening it. "Mr. DeLuca, I need to show you something." Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. The left one, the one resting on the edge of the laptop, had a tremor so slight that most people wouldn't notice. I noticed. I've watched those hands type, calculate, and close fiscal years for 12 years. I know what steady looks like. This was not steady. "The audit item," I said. "Yes, sir." She opened the laptop. On the screen was a loan document from Pacific Western Credit Union, $150,000, commercial line of credit, secured against the operating assets of DeLuca and Associates, dated 5 months ago. May 14th. There was an authorization signature at the bottom of page 3. It said Frank DeLuca. It was not my signature. It was close. Close enough to pass a bank officer who sees 200 signatures a week and doesn't have the time or the training to notice the difference between a real hand and a careful imitation. But I am Frank DeLuca. I have signed my name 350,000 times in 35 years. I know every stroke, every angle, every pressure point where the pen bears down and where it lifts. The way a carpenter knows the grain of a piece of wood he's worked with his whole life. The D was too round. The loop on the K leaned wrong. The A at the end didn't trail off the way mine trails off, with a slight downward pull to the right that I've had since I broke my wrist playing baseball in 1978. I checked 3 times, Mr. DeLuca. Nina's voice was quiet. I ran it against your signature file in the system. It's a 91% match. Close, but not you. Who authorized the release of the collateral documentation? The request came through an online portal. Remote submission. The bank accepted a scanned authorization form. Scanned. Yes, sir. I looked at the screen. $150,000. My company's name. My name. A signature that was almost mine but wasn't. 5 months ago, while I was sitting at my desk running quarterly reports and signing real documents with my real hand, someone had borrowed $150,000 against everything I'd spent 35 years building. I didn't have to ask who. The numbers told me. They always do. Nina. Yes, sir. Thank you for finding this. I'm sorry, Mr. DeLuca. Don't be sorry. You did exactly what I taught you. You followed the numbers. She closed the laptop, stood up, paused at the door, hand on the frame, the same way she'd paused yesterday, with the precision of a woman who knows when to speak and when to let the numbers speak for themselves. Do you want me to file a report with the compliance office? Not yet. Mr. DeLuca. Not yet. Nina. She left. The door closed behind her, softly. The way doors close when someone understands that what just happened in the room is going to take time to settle. Like sediment in water that's been shaken hard. Ruth came in at 5 with my evening medications. She took one look at my face, set the pills on the tray, and said, "You want company or you want quiet?" Quiet. All right, Mr. Decall button works now. Use it. She left. The room went still. I held Gloria's rosary in my good hand. The wooden beads were warm from being in the drawer all day, holding the heat the way old things hold memory. Not perfectly, but enough. I ran my thumb across each one, counting. The way I've counted everything my entire life. Debits, credits, years, mistakes. That night in room 316, alone with the Charleston harbor going black outside my window and the monitor keeping a rhythm my heart couldn't keep on its own, I asked Gloria the question I'd been carrying since Sunday morning. Maybe longer. Maybe 37 years. Did we build him this way, Gloria? Or did we just keep paying for the version he chose to become? She didn't answer. She never does. But the rosary was warm in my hand, and somewhere in that warmth, between the wooden beads and the silver cross she'd held every single night of our marriage, was something close enough to an answer to let me close my eyes. I didn't sleep well, but I slept. And when I opened my eyes on Wednesday morning, the first thing I saw was the harbor light coming through the window, sharp and clear, the way November light gets in Charleston when it's done being gentle and starts being honest. I had a decision to make. And Frank DeLuca doesn't make decisions in the dark. Wednesday morning, I made 3 decisions before the sun cleared the harbor. The first was the hardest. I called Philip Wen at 7:05, before the office opened, before the coffee was made, before anyone in the city of Charleston was awake enough to ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. Philip, I need a wire transfer. $150,000 to Pacific Western Credit Union. Loan payoff. Full balance. Account number ending in 8317. Source account. Personal savings. Silence. 3 seconds. Longer than the pause when I'd cut Dylan's transfers. Philip was an accountant. He understood what a personal savings payoff on a commercial loan meant. He understood whose name was on that loan. And he understood without being told that the man authorizing this transfer was paying a debt he didn't owe for reasons that had nothing to do with finance. Effective when? Today. Done. Anything else? One more thing. After the payoff clears, I want the original loan documentation archived, not destroyed, archived, in my personal file. My eyes only. Understood. I hung up. $150,000. Gone from my personal savings in a single phone call to close a debt my son had opened with my name and a signature I never made. I could have reported it. Forgery. Fraud. A federal offense if the bank chose to pursue it. My own son, prosecuted, possibly imprisoned, certainly ruined. I thought about Gloria. I thought about the pasta dough on the marble counter and the way she used to hum while she rolled it, off-key, always off-key, and how that sound was the most honest thing in our house for 26 years. I thought about what she would have said if I'd told her that our son had forged my name on a $150,000 loan to fund a podcast that had never turned a profit. She would have cried first. Then she would have said, "Fix it, Frank. But don't break him. Ruining your son is not the same as balancing the books." Gloria would have known the difference. So I paid the debt. I archived the evidence. And I started writing the letter. But first, I had one more call to make. Martin Hale picked up on the first ring. 67 years old, a state attorney on King Street. 25 years as my counsel. $400 an hour. Worth every cent because he had no unnecessary opinions and never asked a question he hadn't already answered in his own head. Martin. The will. How old is the current one? 22 years. A pause. The particular pause of a man who has spent decades knowing exactly what people are worth and exactly what they've done to deserve it. I'll have the documents ready. When? Tomorrow morning. 8:30. I'll clear the calendar. I set the phone on the tray. 2 calls. $150,000 poorer. 1 appointment richer. The math was ugly, but the math was right, and I have built my entire life on the principle that right numbers don't have to be pretty. They just have to be true. Nina came in at 9. I told her to be ready to drive me tomorrow morning. What time? 8. She didn't ask where. She didn't ask why. She nodded once and went back to the corner chair with her laptop, running the Peninsula Group numbers the way she ran everything. Quietly, completely, without requiring a single instruction she hadn't already anticipated. Dylan called at 1:47 in the afternoon. I know the exact time because the clock on the wall of room 316 was directly in my line of sight, and I'd been watching it the way you watch a countdown, when you know the detonation is coming and you've already decided to stay in the building. Dad. The warmth was gone. What was left was tight, controlled, the voice of a man who has rehearsed what he's about to say and is still not sure it's going to work. The rent didn't go through. Neither did the studio account. And the card's been declined. That's correct. Silence. Venice Beach silence. The kind that costs $3,200 a month. Is this because of the hospital thing? Because I explained the situation, and you said it was fine. I didn't say it was fine, Dylan. I said go record your podcast. There's a difference. Okay, that's not a beat, rustling. Something shifting in the background. Then Cassandra's voice. Not on speaker yet, but close enough. Low, coaching. The way she always coached. Put me on speaker, I said. Dad. Dylan. The quiet voice. The voice I used when I terminated a client relationship or closed a partnership that had stopped being mutual. Speaker. A click. The room opened up. I could hear the ocean. I could hear traffic on Pacific Avenue. I could hear the particular hum of expensive recording equipment that my money had paid for and my son had never once thanked me for. Cassandra. Frank, hi. Sharp, quick, managing. Listen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Dylan's been under a lot of pressure with the new season, and I'm sure if we all just... Cassandra, I have been the only adult in this arrangement for 4 years. There is no misunderstanding. There is an accounting correction. One beat. Clean. Final. We'll reconcile the accounts when you're back. Face to face. Until then, I suggest you enjoy the Venice Beach weather while it's free. I hung up. The room was quiet. The monitor beeped. The harbor light came through the window flat and sharp, the way Charleston light gets when it stops being polite and starts being precise. Nina was standing in the doorway, not watching me, not performing concern, standing with her laptop under her arm, and an expression I couldn't fully name. Not respect, not pity. Something that looked like a woman watching a man finally close a ledger he'd been carrying open for years, one that had been bleeding red ink the entire time, and he'd been too stubborn or too guilty, or too much of a father to admit it. You good, Mr. DeLuca? Getting there. She nodded, went back to her chair, opened her laptop. The Peninsula Group numbers weren't going to reconcile themselves. That night, after Ruth gave me my medications and turned off the overhead light and closed the door with her particular brand of efficient gentleness, I did something I hadn't planned to do until Friday. I wrote the letter. My right hand was still tethered to the heart monitor, so I wrote with my left. The handwriting was terrible, crooked, shaky, the letters leaning the wrong direction like drunks trying to find their way home. But every word was deliberate. Every sentence was a line item in a final accounting that had taken me 37 years to complete. I wrote down every dollar I had given Dylan since the day he moved to Los Angeles. Every monthly transfer, every studio invoice, every equipment purchase, every apartment deposit. I wrote down the loan, the $150,000, the forged signature, the fact that I had paid it off that morning from my personal savings, without telling him, without filing a report, without doing the one thing that the law entitled me to do and my heart refused to let me. I wrote that I loved him. Because I did. Completely and without condition. The way you love someone you made. Even when they forge your name on a document and call it entrepreneurship. And at the bottom of the page, below the final number, below the total that represented 37 years of fatherhood reduced to a column of debits that would never be repaid, I wrote the only sentence that mattered. The books are balanced, son. Finally, I sealed the letter with my left hand. It took 3 tries. I wrote Dylan Personal on the front, in block letters that looked nothing like my usual handwriting, which was fitting, because nothing about this week looked like my usual life. I set the letter on the bedside table next to Gloria's rosary and turned off the light. Tomorrow, I had 21 pages to sign. Tomorrow, The last ledger gets closed. I slept like a man who'd finally finished an audit he'd been running for 37 years. Some men set fire to what they've built when they're done with it. They pour gasoline on 35 years of work and watch it burn because the heat feels like justice and the smoke looks like closure. Not me. I'm an accountant. I don't burn anything. I transfer it to the correct column, sign it in blue ink, and let the numbers speak for themselves. Nina arrived at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, exactly like she said she would. The Honda Civic was in the second row of the visitor lot, a 2011 model with a cracked side mirror and an inspection sticker that was current because Nina Vargas has never let a deadline pass unchecked in her life. She helped me into my jacket without making a production of it, signed the temporary release papers while Ruth rattled off a list of post-operative instructions that Nina absorbed without writing down a single word, and walked me to the elevator like a woman who'd been doing this her whole life, which in every way that mattered, she had. I got in the car. She'd moved the passenger seat back. Not because I'd asked. Because she'd measured the distance with her eyes the way she measured everything, precisely, without making anyone feel like they were being measured. Charleston rolled past the windows. King Street in November. Live oaks dripping Spanish moss over iron fences that had been standing since before the Civil War. Cobblestones on the side streets. A flower vendor setting up on the corner of Market and Meeting. This city has a way of looking permanent, of reminding you that some things last, that some things were built to outlive the people who built them. I needed that reminder on Thursday morning. I needed it badly. We didn't talk. We didn't need to. Martin Hale met us at the door of his office himself. 70 years old at his next birthday, gray suit, pocket square that probably hadn't changed style since 1994, and the particular expression of a man who has spent decades knowing exactly what people are worth and exactly what they've done to deserve it. His office on King Street smelled like old paper and binding glue, and the kind of quiet that only exists in rooms where serious decisions are made by serious people. The 22-year-old Will was already on the conference table when we walked in, laid flat under the light like a document that had been waiting a long time for someone to finally admit it was wrong. "You've reviewed my notes?" I asked. "Thoroughly. You're certain about the structure?" "The question, Frank, is whether you're certain." I looked at him across the table. 25 years. He'd handled my estate, my trusts, Gloria's will, the corporate charter amendments, every significant legal document in my life except my marriage certificate, and I sometimes thought he would have done a better job with that too. "Martin, I haven't signed a document in 35 years that I wasn't certain about." He almost smiled, opened his folder, and we began. 21 pages, blue ink. My left hand was steadier than it had been last night, but the signature still looked different from the one I'd been putting on contracts since 1989. Fitting. Everything looked different this week. Everything was different this week. Page 7. DeLuca and Associates. 35 years of 5 o'clock mornings. Cold coffee, difficult clients. A name on every contract and a fingerprint on every decision. 65% controlling interest. Effective upon my death or voluntary transfer to Nina Vargas. With a 3-year transition plan that Martin had drafted with the particular care of a man who understood that handing someone a company is not a gift, it's a responsibility, and the transition has to be structured the way a good balance sheet is structured. Every line accounted for, every contingency addressed. Page 12. The remaining 35% to the Gloria DeLuca Foundation for Financial Literacy, a scholarship fund for first-generation immigrant students pursuing accounting and finance degrees in the state of South Carolina. Gloria had volunteered at a literacy center on the South Side before she died. She used to bring boxes of pasta and bags of secondhand books and spend Saturday afternoons helping people fill out tax forms for free. It felt right. It felt exactly like her. It felt like the only entry in this entire ledger that didn't need a single correction. Page 16. The house on Kiowa Island. 3 bedrooms, ocean view, $450,000, assessed value. To Dylan, Frank, DeLuca. A fair return for a son who'd done just enough to qualify as one. Page 21. The letter. Martin took the sealed envelope, marked it, Dylan personnel, logged it into his courier system. Delivery. Friday morning, 9 o'clock. One more night. Let him sleep one more night, not knowing. I signed the last page. Set the pen down. Blue ink on white paper. The room was quiet, the way rooms are quiet after something permanent happens, not silent, but still, like the air itself has registered the change. It's done, Martin said. It's done. Nina was waiting in the car. She'd kept the engine running. The heater was on. Small thing. The kind of small thing that only people who actually pay attention to other people ever think to do. I got in. She pulled out of the parking space. We drove 3 blocks before I said it. Nina, pull over for a minute. She pulled to the curb on King Street, under a live oak that had been growing there longer than either of us had been alive. Engine idling. Heater running. November light falling through the branches in pieces, landing on the dashboard like something broken that still managed to be beautiful. You're getting the company. The silence that followed was the longest of the week. Longer than any of Dylan's pauses. Longer than the 3 seconds Philip Wen took before processing a $150,000 wire. Longer than the night I spent holding Gloria's rosary and asking her questions she couldn't answer. Nina sat inside that silence, the way she sat inside everything, completely, without flinching. Without performing a single emotion she didn't actually feel. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. Mr. DeLuca, that's not why I stayed. I know. I've known for 12 years. I've known since the night I found a 22-year-old girl on a break room floor with a mop bucket for a desk, and a look in her eyes that said she would die before she stopped climbing. I know, I said. That's exactly why. Another silence. Smaller this time. Warmer. Gloria would have had something to say, she said. She would have cried first. Then she would have said it was about time. The smile came then. Not the professional smile. Not the one she wore in client meetings or quarterly reviews. The real one. The one I'd seen maybe half a dozen times in 12 years. The one that belonged to a girl from Cali, Colombia, who crossed a border with her mother and 2 suitcases, and a work visa that expired in 90 days and built a floor underneath herself. One number at a time, until the floor became a foundation and the foundation became a life. It lasted 3 seconds. Then it was gone, back behind the composure she wore the way some people wear armor, not because they're cold, but because they learned early that the world doesn't always treat open hearts with the care they deserve. She pulled back onto King Street without another word. We rode through downtown Charleston in a silence that was full the way a balanced ledger is full. Every entry accounted for, nothing missing, nothing owed. We passed St. Michael's Church where I'd collapsed 5 days ago on the limestone steps. We passed the building on Broad Street where I'd found her on a break room floor with a textbook and a mop bucket 12 years ago. We passed 35 years of numbers that had finally added up to something true. I didn't know it yet, but Dylan's flight had touched down at Charleston International 40 minutes earlier. And this time, he wasn't calling first. He was standing outside room 316 when we came off the elevator. Travel clothes, expensive carry-on, a Venice Beach tan that looked obscene under the fluorescent lights of a cardiac recovery ward. The look of a man who'd done the math on the flight over and didn't like the answer. Cassandra wasn't with him. Smart woman, Cassandra. She'd read the balance sheet from the rental car and decided this was a loss she didn't need her name on. Dylan looked at me, looked at Nina, looked back at me. His jaw was set the way mine sets when something is already out of my hands and I know it. He looked exactly like me. He'd always looked exactly like me. That used to fill me with pride. The kind of pride that makes a man write checks he shouldn't write and forgive things he shouldn't forgive because the face across the table is his own. Standing in that corridor on a Thursday afternoon, it just made me tired. Profoundly, bone deep, 37 years of compounding interest tired. You change the transfers, he said. Yes, you're changing the will. Not a question. Information travels fast when money stops. It always has. We should talk inside, I said. We can talk right here. I looked at my son, 37 years old. Linen shirt, probably $200. Sneakers that cost more than Nina's car payment. A carry-on bag worth more than the mop bucket she'd balanced a textbook on at 22 years old in a break room at 11 at night while he was in Los Angeles, spending my money on a podcast that taught other people how to be entrepreneurs without ever having been one himself. Dylan. I kept my voice the way I kept it in every negotiation that mattered. Flat, quiet, immovable. The voice of a man who has run the numbers, checked them twice, and signed at the bottom in blue ink. You flew back from Los Angeles, which tells me you already know something has changed. A beat. What you don't know yet is how permanent. Then tell me, right now, Martin Hale will walk you through everything Friday morning. There's a letter with him. Read the letter before you call me, before you call anyone, before you do anything. Read it first. Dad, I love you. I said it clean. No cushion, no apology wrapped around it. No invoice attached. I have loved you every single day of your life, and I will love you every day of whatever is left of mine. That is not changing. I paused. Long enough for the words to land. Long enough for him to hear what was coming next and understand that it was coming from the same place as the love, not from anger, not from spite, but from a man who had finally read his own ledger honestly and couldn't pretend the numbers balanced when they didn't. I paid your debt, Dylan. Every cent of it. The one at Pacific Western Credit Union that has my name on the authorization line but not my signature. That landed different. I watched it land. His face changed the way a spreadsheet changes when you find the error you've been looking for. Fast. Everything shifting. The formulas recalculating in real time. Fear first. Then recognition. Then something underneath both of them. Something that had the shape of shame and might grow into it someday if he gave it room. If he watered it. If he let it sit in the light long enough to become something honest. What's changing, I said, is that I am done financing your attention. The words hit the corridor, the way a closing entry hits a ledger. Final. Irreversible. The kind of entry you don't make until you're certain, and I was certain, the way I've been certain about every number I've ever signed my name to. Dylan didn't respond. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, and nothing came out, which was the most honest thing he'd said to me in 4 years. Nina stepped forward, opened the door to room 316, held it, didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She'd been holding doors open for 12 years, quietly, without being asked, without presenting anyone with a receipt for the effort. I walked through. The door closed behind me. We didn't hear Dylan leave, but after a while the corridor went quiet and stayed that way. Ran the particular quiet of a man standing alone with a number he can't negotiate, and a letter he hasn't read yet, and a father who just told him, for the first time in 37 years, the difference between being loved and being paid for. Ruth looked up from her medication tray, read the room in 1 second the way sharp people do, and said, "Dinner in 20 minutes, Mr. D. And this time you're eating all of it." "Yes, ma'am," I said. I sat on the edge of the bed. Nina took her chair in the corner, the one she'd been sitting in since Monday, the one that by now had become as much hers as the desk in my office, as the laptop she carried, as the company she was going to run. Charleston turned gold outside the window. That late November low-country light, the kind that comes at the end of hard days and makes everything look survivable. Maybe even worth it. Gloria used to love that light. She used to stand at the kitchen window at this hour, watching it turn the harbor into something that looked like God had dipped his hand in it. I used to watch her watching it and think that some things in this life don't fit in a spreadsheet, and that's all right, because the things that don't fit are usually the things that matter most. My phone sat on the bedside table. Screen dark. No buzzing. No missed calls stacking up like unpaid invoices. Just quiet. Clean. Earned. Gloria's rosary lay next to it. The wooden beads catching the last of the gold light. Warm the way they'd been warm every night this week, holding something I couldn't name and didn't need to. Some things you don't audit. Some things you just trust. And trust, real trust, the kind you can build a life on, the kind you can build a company on, the kind that a girl from Colombia earns one number at a time on a break room floor at 11 at night. That's not a transaction. That's a grace. DeLuca and Associates had a future. The right hands. The right heart. The right name on the door. Eventually, when the transition was complete and the numbers proved what I already knew, a letter sat sealed on King Street, waiting for a Friday morning courier and a son who would have to decide whether the house on Kiowa Island was worth more or less than what he'd thrown away. And Nina Vargas, 12 years of showing up without being asked, doing right in rooms where nobody was watching, running numbers at midnight, and bringing coffee at dawn, and never once, not once in 12 years, presenting me with an invoice for any of it, was going to run an $11 million company. Because that's what happens when you earn something. It doesn't come with a bill. It doesn't come with conditions. It finds you. The way light finds a window. The way grace finds the people who weren't looking for it. The way the right number, the true number, the one you've been searching for your whole life, finally appears at the bottom of the last page, and you look at it, and you know, the books are balanced. Finally, you know, there's a verse that says, "The Lord sees what is done in secret, and He rewards what is done in secret." I believe that. I've seen it in the numbers. I've seen it in the quiet faithfulness of people who do right when the room is empty and the ledger is closed and nobody is checking. I've seen it in the way God places certain people in your life, not by accident, not by coincidence, but by a grace so precise it would make an accountant weep. If this story reached something inside you, something you've been carrying, something you've been calculating, something you've been afraid to balance, I want you to know that the ledger is never too old to correct. It's never too late to sign your name to the truth. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, the same way I read every receipt, carefully, completely, and with gratitude. And subscribe, so you never miss a story that reminds you what the numbers are really for.